record. I record it. For those of you who did not, I'm recording, yes. Good. I've been recording challenge the last 2 weeks. I apologize. Good morning. Happy Father's Day, first of all.
Thank you. And to all the others out there, we have several. So Cindy and Paula, you can't hear me?
Oh, it's one. Yours on?
How about now? Is that better? Yeah. And then I bounced it off the floor. Yeah, that's good for it. Cindy and Paula send cards and do things for people all the time, and we talk about being part of a body, and it all matters. It makes a big difference. Cindy, the numbers look better. We still have some concerns, but it's better, and we're grateful for that. And we get, in the middle of all that, we get cards from Cindy and Paula instead of the other way around. So I mean, we really appreciate that. Cheryl is feeling better.
Not today, though. She's not on. Oh, there's Tracy again. Cheryl is on the right. I don't know. There she is. She's there, but she's not on camera.
Well, those are the ones we have. Our daughter Julie has gotten approved for a medication, so she hasn't been doing well. Keep her in your prayers, but they are moving forward pretty quickly. This doctor that she's with has really been, they've followed up better than anyone ever has, and that's good news for us. God, we are thankful. Always try to remember to come with that. Sometimes I feel like we come asking more than saying thanks. You know how concerned we are for these people on our list. It seems like so many that it gets overwhelming. And I guess that's where trust comes in. We go looking for answers and we don't find them sometimes. We don't have the understanding, but we have to trust, and we do. These ones that we keep on our list, Kathy and Alton, Phil and Cherie, both very similar, and it's so hard. And you put us here to be part of your body, to be part of your hands and feet. Remind us of that. We're thankful for those whose hands we've seen your hands on. And yet we know there are others that we could reach out for. Today, I really feel the reminder that part of this is our job. You put us here for comfort for others. Help us to do that. We're studying things that show you involved in ways that are extraordinary. Remind us that a lot of the things we see are extraordinary, that we take them for granted. Amen.
Okay. We are recorded, and we are on our third and final week of Rahab. And remember, we're at about 1400 BC, so 1400 years before Christ was born. And we are 40 years after the Israelites left Egypt, and they wandered in the outside the promised land. And as Scott pointed out last time, that does not mean they were lost for 40 years. That means they were nomadic and were afraid to enter the promised land. And now they're finally ready to enter the promised land.
Go ahead.
Rahab was a Canaanite prostitute who lived in Jericho, and she hid two unnamed spies from Israel. And we heard about her in week 1 of Rahab, and last week we did not hear her name mentioned at all. And we are now in Joshua 6, and we will hear about her again. And Joshua is about 3 miles outside of Jericho. Joshua was one of the spies 40 years ago when Moses tried to enter the promised land, and he was one of the 12, and there was only 2, he and Caleb, that came back positive, and the other 10 came back and said we should not go into the promised land, so they didn't. So Joshua is now the leader. And where we left off last week is they're 3 miles outside of Jericho. They have just crossed the Jordan River, which was parted by God. You know, we figured they would be very psyched to go in and attack Jericho. And instead, God says, hey, let's stop. We need to get things right first. All the men that had left had not been circumcised. So God said, circumcise them all and celebrate Passover. And the manna that God had given them for 40 years had stopped.
I thought you said we weren't going to redo last week.
Yeah. Go ahead. Anything insights you want to?
No, we're about to this episode today. The very first part of this is something that is very, very strange. It to us especially, it's very unusual. There are reasons for it. I think if we learn to look at why, sometimes they make more sense. I'd rather just jump right into it. We'll talk about it.
Okay, and I said we were going to start at Joshua 6, and we're actually starting at Joshua 5, verse 13. That's where we left off last week. Now, when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied. "I have now come as a commander of the Lord's army." Then Joshua fell face down in reverence and asked him, "What does my Lord have to say to his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so.
So I hope that some of you read in the Bible on your own. And part of that, there's a lot of stuff packed in this. And part of the lesson today is learning how to recognize some things that when you read on your own will jump, if you know, then they jump out at you. But what you see is, remember, they're close to Jericho at this point. They're about ready to go in. They were 5 miles away last week. So now they're heading that direction. They're close. I don't think there's any way Joshua is alone when this happens. He didn't sneak off, but he sees this guy. He sees a man with a drawn sword. You usually don't walk around, no matter what you see in Hollywood. I mean, it's like going around with a drawn gun. That attracts attention. And he sees this guy, and he immediately recognizes, however this happens, that this is not a normal man. I mean, you can see that by his response. There's something about him, I don't know, but he asked the guy, "Are you for us or are you for our enemies?" And so what difference would one guy make? Unless there's something unusual and powerful about this guy. And the guy's response, it says neither, which is kind of interesting. In Hebrew, it's a single word, lo, and it means no. Are you for us or our enemies? And the response is no. That's properly neither. But what he says is, I've come as the commander of the Lord's army. If you have a Bible with you, look where it says Lord, and notice that's in all caps, right?
Well, it depends on what translation, probably.
Almost all of them have that in all caps. There are a few that don't. But when you see that Lord in all caps, that's Yahweh. There's a, well, that's unpleasant, and it's going to keep going.
It's yours.
Party time.
I don't know who would be calling me at this time, but probably a salesperson. Anyway, and I should have turned that off. I'm so sorry. Just click the button on the side. There you go. Yeah, that's good.
Oh.
She knows better. She's calling to say Happy Father's Day. Let me see if I can get your train of thought back since I just blew that. He says he's come as commander of Yahweh's army. There are people, there's a term called theophany. And theophany is supposed to be the actual physical presence of God on earth. And you know, I kind of, a lot of the time, what they call theophany, I question. They say that the burning bush, when Moses saw the burning bush, that was theophany. Well, I don't think God looks like a burning bush. So I don't know. I don't know how you interpret that. And I tell you these.
Sorry, it's our daughter again.
It's one of those mornings.
Yeah.
I tell you this because in case you hear these things, it gets confusing. But he says, I'm commander of the Lord's, of Yahweh's army. I'm not for either one of you. And the question you should ask is, well, what does that mean? I'm not for either one of you. They're going into a battle, right? Remember that while they're on the other side of the Jordan, God says he's going to elevate Joshua so that the people respect him the same way they did Moses. God's been at work in this, and he's prepared the way. So he's made them understand that Joshua is God's leader. He's not just some guy who got elected. That's an important thing for them because they're going to go into a situation that, you know, last time they were here, they chickened out. So he's actually been preparing for some time what's going to go on here. Then they go to the river, and the river is like it's dammed up, and they're able to cross across the Jordan that's overflowing its banks very quickly. That tells them God is with them, right? They get to the other side, and they get this instruction that says, you're going to circumcise all the men who haven't been for the last 40 years. You're going to get your relationship in this covenant with me right. And then he says, oh yeah, and you're going to take the time to celebrate Passover. You see the preparation that's been done. This is being done for Israel, for the people. God doesn't need them. They need him. And he's prepared them so that they understand I'm with you, and this is actually my battle. And so they go through all of this stuff, and they're heading in, and Joshua sees this guy. We aren't told if anyone else sees or hears this, right? Joshua is clearly intended to get this message. And he says, I am the commander of God's army. And the message here is, I'm going out in front of you. This is my battle. And you know, are you for us or are you for our enemies? Neither one. This is my battle. You're fight. I'm not on your side. You're fight. You're going in for my battle, not yours. It's an important distinction. And understand this thing. This encounter seems so strange, but you look at the purpose of it, and it tells them not only what's going to happen in this battle, but what's going to keep happening for years while they go in and claim this land that they've been promised. And then Joshua falls down on his knees and says, what does my Lord, how did he phrase it?
What does my Lord have to say to his servant?
What does my Lord have to say to his servant? And
the commander of the
well,
army.
hold on just a second. I want to be sure that he fell face down and says, what does my Lord? Notice this time, if you have your Bible, yours is underscored?
That the Lord is underscored. First, there could be another time when by the way, this does not work.
Oh.
The commander thinks that the word Lord is capitalized.
So is all the letters capitalized on that one, or in the,
Not mine.
Just when the commander speaks. When Joshua says, like what the shot said.
Right.
Joshua said, what does the Lord, have to say to his servant?
right, Right.
Joshua's, Lord is not capitalized.
That's
What he's, and there's a subtle difference in that. What does the Lord say and what does my Lord say? There's a word that's used a lot that's Adonai, and you might call your king Lord, right? My Lord. That's not going to be in all caps. So what does my Lord say? It's unclear exactly who this guy is. Is this a theophany? Is this literally God present? I read so much this week, and it's the camps are divided, and people look at this in a way that's going to support what they already think. All I can tell you is what's important
is the why.
is the why. Joshua gets this message, clearly a message directly from God, that this is my battle. I'm with you. We never hear about this guy again, by the way. I mean, Joshua doesn't think that this guy is going to, stand up and take his place. This guy goes out ahead of them. God has gone ahead of them. The other thing that to put all of this together, remember that the people, the Canaanites, have heard about Israel and they've heard about Yahweh and they've realized that he's real and he is with his people. They've heard of, because the river's not that far away. People have seen this and word has gotten back and they're scared to death. So not only has he prepared Israel, but he's prepared their opposition. He's prepared their enemies to be frightened of them, to be worried about what's going on. This is important preparation. And the commander, all he tells him is, take off your sandals, for the place you're standing is holy. And that's exactly what Moses was told when he saw the burning bush. You see the Red Sea part, you see the Jordan stopped up, you see the parallels between Moses. These are bookends on this migration of Israel. It happened at the beginning and now it's happening here at the end. So I think it says, the other thing he says, take off your sandals, the place you're standing is holy. And Joshua did so. It seems like strange things to say, but Joshua's doing what he's being told. He's obedient.
So a couple of quick ones. So they're still on the west side of the Jordan.
No. Yeah, west. Yeah, that's right. They're
Not the promised land.
No, they're in the promised land.
They're in the promised
They crossed over last week, remember?
Right.
Yeah.
And then Joshua had been told before this that God had let him know that there was his battle.
Yes.
Yahweh's battle.
Yes.
And so your analogy, or just throw some at you, Jacob wrestled with an entity,
Yes.
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 All of a sudden, later on we may know that it was God. So I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, yeah. I mean,
What I'm trying to get across on some of this, if you do read on your own, and if you hear me commentaries, if you watch people, they're going to tell you a lot of stuff that they aren't. We know that God is present. We know that there are these beings we call angels, Malach. There is one that gets referenced, Malach Yahweh, the angel of God. And so there's some of this that we know enough, and what we don't know, I think we probably just aren't entitled to just yet. But we know God is present. And what I really want to get, and I probably already have, but I'm going to say it one more time, is to recognize all of the preparation that has been done before these people go to Jericho, right? He has prepared them. He's given them every reason to believe, every reason to have faith, every reason to obey. And he said, I'm going out ahead of you. You come in, I'm making you a part of this, but don't get too carried away with yourselves. One of the other judges, most of you have heard about Gideon. Gideon gets told, to go fight. And he says, cut your army in half, cut it in half again. Now go down to the water, and everybody who laps water like a dog, those are the ones you take, just a few hundred, and everybody else send them home. God left no doubt that it was going to be him winning this battle, right? And afterwards, Gideon takes some of the spoils of war and builds a monument to himself, like he's won this mighty battle. These are lessons for us. This inspired word gets passed down to remind us that not to get carried away with ourselves, not to take credit where it's not our credit to be taken. We're
And
not.
as you do true confessions, I'll do a true confession. I think about, I say, you pray for something, and then and the prayer is granted, and then you take credit for it. And those of you who know me well know I've had MS for 30 years, and I have been blessed. I've had, most people don't even know I have MS, and I have MS with lots of lesions on my brain and my spine, and it's God. But how many times do I take credit for it? And that's an example of that. We pray for relief from something, we get it, and then we take credit.
So if you get anything out of this strange little section, remember that part. It's going to say.
Okay, yeah.
Not to beat an old horse to death here, but Yahweh has been talking to Joshua.
You have a mic?
Is that a prophet? Yeah, I think I do.
Okay.
Is that
Absolutely.
so? My question is, why do we need this guy with a sword in his hand? Why doesn't he continue this direct talk with Joshua unless it's a teaching tool for the masses like us? I mean, it wasn't clear enough, obviously, because you don't think that Joshua actually heard my word, my instructions. So I'm going to send you this figure that you might understand, so you could believe that it's true.
Right.
Am I?
Why does he, after he's already been talking to him, why does Joshua need more of a reminder? Is that a fair paraphrase? Some of it's going to come out in 6, because I'm actually, this is actually good. When you see what they're asked to do, most people would go, wait, what? You want me to do what? That seems ridiculous. But I can't speak for Joshua. I can speak for me. There's the old thing that says, Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief. We believe and then we doubt. We believe and we begin to falter. Peter steps out of the boat, walks on water for just a bit, and then begins to doubt and begins to sink. My belief, since you asked me, I'm going to tell you what I think, is that this is what we're prone to. And Joshua needs to be strong, but he also needs to remember when all this is over, not to take credit himself. This I think is a courtesy call. This is something that we get put in situations where we begin to doubt ourselves. We begin to doubt God. We're human. And so I think that would be my explanation. Look at what happens when they go to Jericho.
Hey, Scott,
Yes, sir.
are there any other instances in which God makes a promise that I'm gonna lead you, I'm gonna be in front, and maybe not do this? Because I can think, him telling Moses to take the people out, and yes, he gave him the staff, and the staff had already worked in front of the Pharaoh. But to sit there on top of that thing until the seas part, I would have a thought to say that might be a reason to doubt, but Moses didn't. So there wasn't a manifestation of a sort of physical being like this one is. Were there any other instances in which God tells somebody in the story of the Bible that I will be in front for you? And
I hope everybody can hear that. I hope these mics are working. We may have to rethink this again. But the idea is, there any other instances where people get told directly and then have doubts? Look at Moses himself. When he first gets told, and God has been dealing with him in very powerful ways, and he says, I want you to go to Pharaoh. And what does Moses say? I'm not a good talker. I'm right? He begins to weasel on the thing. And finally God says, look, I'll let Aaron be your mouthpiece. How's that? But you're going to go. growing up in Texas, we grew up with a lot of colorful sayings, right? And there's one of them I'll bring up periodically. Never mind if the horse goes blind, just load the wagon, right? Stop asking so many questions, just do what I tell you. That's a hard thing for us. It's very difficult. Moses had to get not only reassurance, Moses had to get special accommodations. Yeah, it happens, and we can talk about some more, but I think it's a model for us.
But I think what he was asking was, is there a time where there was another
Instance in
instance
which-
that God came right before and reminded him, and that?
Oh, like
Right,
this. I
that-
see what I see what you're
Yeah.
saying. And I was thinking that that time where he says, "Here, I'll give you Aaron." I was thinking it was kind of one of those. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm just drawing blanks, but I can tell you if it was me being asked to do some of this stuff, I would probably need some reinforcement. I would think, it's fortunate. I would give you an exact example if I got put in this situation.
Chapter 6. Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Behold, I have delivered Jericho into your hand, along with its king and its mighty men of valor. March
Let's
around."
stop right here for just a second.
Okay.
And it's an odd place to stop. But you look at what it starts out with, and it says that Jericho is shut up tightly. They've closed the gates, they've battened the hatches, the windows, everything, because of the Israelites. God has prepared them in the opposite way. They're scared. This reinforces, a lot of the time I've read ahead, and you're going to find out these things. It's not just me making them up. They're in here. We just haven't gotten here. But he has prepared them to be so frightened, and they've shut everything down. They know they're coming. But look at this next part. He says, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, behold, I've delivered Jericho into your hand." And it speaks about something that hasn't happened yet, as if it's already happened, right? This is pretty common in prophecy. You see prophets, when they're prophesying the future, they talk about a thing that's going to happen as if it's already happened. And I have this idea that in their mind, they've already seen this thing come to fruition, and it's as good as if it's already happened. And in this case, God tells Joshua, "I've already delivered them." They haven't fought a battle yet. Nothing has happened. And he gets this assurance, "I've already won the day for you. You just have to go do the part that I've set for you, but I've already taken care of everything." Important distinction. And then they
March around the city with all men of war, circling the city one time. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram's horns in front of the ark. Then on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times while the priests blow the horns. And when there is a long blast of the ram's horn and you hear its sound, have all the people give a mighty shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and all your people will charge straight into the city. So Joshua, son of Nun, summoned the priests and said, "Take up the ark of the covenant and have 7 priests carry 7 ram horns in front of the ark of the Lord." And he told the people, "Advance and march around the city with the armed troops going ahead of the ark of the Lord." After Joshua had spoken to the people, 7 priests carrying 7 ram horns before the Lord advanced and blew the horns, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. While the horns continued to sound, the armed troops marched ahead of the priest who blew the horns, and the rear guard followed the ark. But Joshua had commanded the people, "Do not give a battle cry or let your voice be heard. Do not let one word come out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Then you are to shout." So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once, and the people returned to the camp and spent the night there.
So you would see how they would hear this and think, that's kind of ridiculous. We're here to fight a battle. Yeah. I want you get priests with 7 ram's horns. Those horns are called a shofar. They blow them on the Day of Atonement, but they're, they make a really cool sound. There are people who actually, they're just not willing to believe in a miracle. And so they actually say that the noise from the ram's horn and the shout caused a vibration that brought the walls of Jericho down. You understand, these are walls that are thick enough at the top to drive a cart around the perimeter. And they're saying that 7 ram's horns and some people shouting was enough special vibration, rather than saying, okay, I understand if you don't want to believe in miracles, but don't tell me that 7 ram's horns and some people shouting brought down the walls of a city. Okay, that's just silly. Just say, I don't believe. I don't know why you're even bothering to read this, but I don't believe, and I'm okay with that. But that's just ridiculous. Years ago, we were going to a church, and I had something happen. If I told you about it, you'd probably say I'm crazy or a liar. Something so inexplicable, you can't deny that it's a miracle. And my question, I was saying is, why me? But I get this really strong feeling, this certainty that I need to go tell the pastor of the church about it. And as I said, when the way if you're being asked to do something is when your first thought is, oh dear God, not that. I don't want to tell him, because he's going to think I'm making it up. He's going to think, I'm trying to get attention. He's going to think I'm nuts. And I avoided it. I called the guy and he says, oh, I'm busy today. And I said, okay, good. I'm done. And I put it off. And then he goes on a little trip, and I just put it aside. We went to some people's house, and he was there sitting at the bar on a bar stool, and I said, okay, I get it. And I go outside and I'm telling this story, and he comes back with this logical, ridiculous explanation of what had happened. And it was every bit as silly as saying that 7 ram's horns and a shout brought down the walls of the city. And what I understood suddenly was that this man is leading this church, and he doesn't believe that God really acts in this world. And that's when we knew it was time for us to go somewhere else. The idea, if you don't believe, you don't believe. But don't tell me, this ridiculous stuff. What we're being told here is Joshua tells the people,
40,000 plus.
Stay totally silent. Don't do anything but just march around, right? Don't even make a sound. Blow a ram's horn, and we're going to do this. And at some point, I'm going to tell you to shout, and that's it. That's your whole part in this. If you're a soldier and your leader tells you, your general says, I just want you to walk around the city, right, for a day, and then another day. Do you think there are going to be some people that go, okay, this guy's lost his mind, I'm leaving? But remember, we're already told that God had shown them so that they would respect Joshua the same way they respected Moses. This has been prepared in advance. And so Joshua tells them, just go march around the city. Don't make a sound. Now put yourself in the position of the people inside. They're afraid. And they're expecting a siege on the walls, and we'll push ladders over and arrows and all this stuff. And instead, these people come up and they just march around silently, except for this horn. Now, and I'm doing this because I want you to see the reality of this, that it's not just abstract. In World War I think it was 1 and not 2, the Scotsmen would come and blow those bagpipes, and it just scared the people on the other side. Through the fog, you hear this noise. This is cold-blooded stuff to just go and quietly march around. They have to be thinking, oh my gosh, they have this God that actually, ours doesn't do anything. Theirs actually does something, and they're just out there marching around day after day. By the time it's time for this last part to happen, they're scared to death. This makes sense if you look at it from that standpoint. The people inside are, they practically give up, except I think they're afraid of being killed. So you see the prep that has gone into this. Did you get to the part where they finally blow it?
No. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priest took the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horns kept marching ahead of the ark of the Lord and blowing the horns. The armed troops went in front of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the horns kept sounding. So on the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days.
I think I've already
Okay.
covered it. I mean, you understand
Okay.
there's 6 days though of march around the city and then just quit. Then just go away.
Then on the 7th day, they got up at dawn and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. That was the only day they circled the city 7 times. After the 7th time around, the priest blew the horns, and Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." Now the city and everything in it must be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and all those with her in her house will live, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the things devoted to destruction, lest you yourself be set apart for destruction. If you take any of these things, you will set apart the camp of Israel for destruction and bring disaster upon it. For all the silver and gold and all the articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They must go into his treasury.
So 7, numbers, every time you see a certain number, it doesn't mean that it's something special, but there are times where it is. 7 represents completion. And on this 7th day, they march around 7 times. It's the only time that they go 7 times around. It's completed. This overthrow is done. The walls come down, but they've been told, don't touch any of their stuff. We've mentioned this before, but in a battle, it's understood. At this time, it was totally understood that the soldiers get to keep the plunder. The leader, the king, gets his share first, but everything else they get to just pick up and take off. Soldier, that's part of the reason that they fight. It's a big part of the reason that they fight. And you want to follow somebody who wins a lot of battles because you get a lot of loot. You get paid well. And he tells them, and this happens other times through the Old Testament, this isn't your battle. This is my battle. And God does deliver these things in some uncanny ways, but they're not to take because this isn't about loot. I don't want anybody saying that this was done so that you could grab their stuff. This is my battle. I win it for you. Leave the stuff alone. And you can see, how this is going to come out, even if you haven't read ahead. Somebody's going to see stuff and pick it up. But they've been given this instruction. Everything that's happened makes them totally aware this is God's battle.
And they said everything, on verse 17, now the city and everything in it must be devoted to the Lord for destruction. And that devoted to the Lord for destruction is one word in Hebrew.
It is a single word. I think it's harem, and it, it's almost like something it can be something that's accursed. It's cursed, but devoted to destruction for the Lord. That's this confirmation. It's not your stuff. It's my battle, and these things are going to go into, it says the treasury, but they're going to be building. Remember, they're inheriting this land. They're going to be building the ark of the tabernacle and all this. This is to go in to the treasury, but devoted to destruction for the Lord. It's already taken care of. And you can see why they're told not to touch it.
What is that word in Hebrew?
It's right here.
Why
Devoted
is the
to
word
destruction.
destruction as opposed to dedicated to the Lord? Why is the word destruction there? Do we know?
It's one of those things that you have to go back to the root in Hebrew. You have to understand that it's also used to describe something that's accursed, that's cursed. These people, and there are a lot of reasons, if you knew more about the Canaanites, ritual sacrifice and everything else, they are set apart for destruction. And the stuff is not intended to be hauled off. It's intended to be set apart for God's use.
My question is the word indicative of the new level? Forget the earth, buddies. We're going to destroy the earth and you're going to come to me.
Yeah, it is harem. Oh geez, I'm trying to remember the Hebrew on it, but the idea is that it's been set apart. It's accursed as it sits. Leave it alone. The stuff still has intrinsic value, and that's where you find out that it's not like some magical power in it, but it has been. How about this? How about a drug dealer? A really violent drug dealer that gives money to the church. Can you see how it might be unwise to take that money? How maybe building your church on drug money is probably not. It's not clean. There's nothing about the bills themselves that there's nothing wrong with them, but it's how they've been used. And so he's telling them, you're not going to build this promised land on this battle. This is mine. Best I got.
Hey, Scott,
Yes, sir.
so, and I'm remembering correctly, Abraham was told that this is the land of God, you're to leave for the land of Canaan, right?
Right.
Okay, and that's.
Yeah, no,
All this time it's been not theirs yet.
that's true. This is the fruition of all that. And this idea of battles is all through the Old Testament. That there are certain battles, they get to keep the loot all the time, except certain times God says, I have something in mind for this. I'm going to go ahead of you. You're not even going to have to really fight. I'm winning this battle. Don't touch the stuff. When God does that for you, it's not so that you get rich. There's your bottom line.
Verse 20. So when the ram's horns sounded, the people shouted. When they heard the blast of the horn, the people gave a great shout, and the wall collapsed. Then all the people charged straight into the city and captured it. At the edge of the sword, they devoted to destruction everything in the city, man and woman, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkeys. Meanwhile, Joshua told the two men who had spied out the land, go into the house of the prostitute and bring out the woman and all who are with her, just as you promised her. So the young spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother and brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her whole family and settled them outside the camp of Israel. Then the Israelites burned up the city and everything in it. However, they put the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. And Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her father's household and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent to spy out Jericho. So she has lived among the Israelites to this day.
So there's several things in here that probably need to be covered. We used to teach a kids Sunday school, and at one point we were talking about one of these miraculous things in the Old Testament, and I'm looking at all these little faces, And you can tell they're thinking, I know what they're thinking. They're thinking, how come I never see stuff like this happen? This is kind of nuts. And so I asked him, I said, do any of you wonder why we don't see stuff like this going on around us? And you can see them look at each other, and finally a couple of little hands come up. It's like, are you going to tell mom and dad? You know, I'm not going to tell them I don't believe in this stuff, but that's what happens. And so I'll tell you what I told them. I like to fish, and sometimes I watch fishing shows on TV, right? And these guys sit here and catch fish one after the other. It's like a miracle. Just every time you throw something in, a fish comes out. So have you ever seen that happen? No, that's because they film these shows over days or a week, and they only show you the little parts where the fish is coming in. This didn't happen like it looks like in the Old Testament. These things happen, but if you do the math, if you run the timeline, they're not happening all the time. These are some very peculiar, pointed circumstances. And if you wonder why it doesn't look like that all the time, part of that is because it never happened on a daily basis. And part of it is because if we got told to go march around the city 7 times and shout, we'd hit the door. We'd go to the movies or something. I'm not taking part in that. And not only that, but we get told, oh, and by the way, when you're done, there's nothing in it for you. You don't get paid. Nobody's going to do that. You want to know why we don't see this stuff? There are a whole lot of reasons for it. This was important, for the history, for what was going to be coming. Rahab had been promised that they wouldn't be touched, and they tell them before they go in, and then once they're going in, he says, go get her, escort her out, keep her safe. Rahab helped them, but it's important to remember that she said, I know your God is real. I know your God is the God of the heavens and the earth, and that this land is yours. Rahab that's faith. She confesses it with her mouth. She acts on it. She puts her money where her mouth is. They return that, but she actually becomes part of what's called the assembly. She's an honorary Jew, we find out, and Mary will talk about it, but she actually marries, one of the Israelites and becomes part of the family tree of Jesus himself. So, I don't think we want to keep reading too much more. One of the guys actually does take some of the stuff. You saw it coming.
Well, I'm going to read the end of
Okay.
6 just real quick. At that time, Joshua invoked his solemn oath. Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and rebuilds the city Jericho at the cost of his firstborn. He will lay its foundation at the cost of his youngest. He will set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. Then what I wanted to tell you is I like the rest of the story. I always like, what was it? Who was the guy on 60 Minutes?
Yeah, I can't.
Mike Wallace.
No.
And
At the
now
end of
the rest of the story.
Oh, that
Henry,
was,
Paul,
the little old man.
Yeah. Oh, we're terrible at what?
No.
Paul Harvey.
It is
correct.
Paul Harvey.
No.
Paul Harvey's right.
It is Paul Harvey. Now we've spent how much
Okay,
time?
sorry. Anyhow, the
establish-
rest of the story. So the rest of the story, you don't get to, Rahab's name that's the last time in chapter 6, Rahab's name is ever mentioned in the Old Testament. Okay? We never hear of Rahab again. But what do we hear? We're going to hear of Rahab 3 other times in the New Testament. I'm going to point that out to you. But the other rest of the story I'm going to tell you before we get to the New Testament is, spoiler alert, there was a guy who decided, oh, there's a whole bunch of gold and silver, and we're going to take it. And things do not turn out well for him and his family.
No, they're told if you do this, if you take the loot, it's going to go bad. One person can poison the whole assembly, the whole nation. You have to, you're one people, and if one of you messes up, it's gonna cost all of you, and it does. You notice that they're told, since you went ahead and read it, don't rebuild Jericho. That's pretty harsh. I want it to stay in ruins. And if someone does rebuild it, it's going to cost them and the next generation. That actually happens later on. We aren't going to get into it, but somebody comes in, and the king of Israel at the time lets him do it, and it costs them. These times that you're told these things, it's best to pay attention to them.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
so just again, remembering from something you said before. When the spies had come in and Rahab had taken them into the house, and when the officials came looking for them, she says, no, they're not here, blah, blah, blah. The way they escaped, if I remember correctly, you told me, is that her house was built into the wall of Jericho.
That is
Right.
correct.
So I guess when the wall fell, her apartment didn't fall,
Apparently.
apparently. All right.
Now, that's the way it seems. Those are some of the operational details,
That beyond our scope to accomplish.
That's right.
So
I don't know why. I mean,
Yeah,
if she was out of it, I mean, it doesn't matter what the apartment was.
she wasn't out of it. She had her family was in her house.
Right.
That's what they promised her.
were they
pulled her
were they
out.
protected? We're not told, but you're right. That's what you would have to. That's what Was it every single rock on the wall? I don't know, but I will tell you. And here I'm going to get distracted. We're going to be a few, but we're in church one time, and the sermon is about Paul and Barnabas are in prison, and you remember the earth shakes and the walls come down, and the minister says, "Isn't it great that we serve a God who breaks down walls?" And somebody said, unless you happen to be the wall. And I looked around because I thought that's a strange thing to say. And I realized, I looked at Mary, did you hear that? And I spent the rest of the day, I'm thinking, what does that even mean?
Unless you're the wall.
Unless you're the wall. We often are the root cause of the problems, and we go to God and we say, I want you to break this wall down that's trapping me, and you're part of the wall, and it's going to hurt when that happens. It's great that God breaks down walls, but it's also painful when you're actually part of the wall. And that was one of those bizarre times. I heard it. I can't say I heard it with my ears, but that has come up as I deal with people for a lot of years, and myself. So I don't know what happened exactly on that, but I do know that Rahab is spared. And Mary wants to talk, a whole lot about the New Testament references.
No, but I'm just, so Rahab appears 3 times in the New Testament. First time is in Matthew 5, verse 6, and it says, Salome, the father of Boaz, by Rahab. Boaz, and this is the genealogy of Jesus. And so it starts before that. But Salome was the father of Boaz by Rahab. Boaz, the father of the Obed by Ruth. Obed, the father of Jesse. And Jesse, the father of David the king. So Rahab married somebody named Salome. We don't know who that was, but Rahab and Salome have a son named Boaz. Boaz marries Ruth. Ruth has a son named Obed. Obed has a son named Jesse, and Jesse has a son named David, King David. I mean, if that isn't amazing, it's just amazing to me. And we're going to study Ruth next.
Yep. But I gotta, this thing about Rahab, remember, this is how we started. Without Rahab, she hides those spies. She does an action out of faith, out of belief in Yahweh, that you would think, well, it would have been a whole lot easier for her just to turn them in, right? And not betray her own people. But she does. I've gotten some pushback over her being a prostitute, okay? It says what it says. That's not condemning her. You need to understand that at this time, a lot of these religions, these Canaanite religions, literally have prostitutes. They have temple prostitutes or shrine prostitutes. There are people who, want to rewrite history and say, oh, that's not true, but it's directly referenced. I mean, it is true. They may not have thought she was doing a bad thing. She may not have thought she was doing a bad thing. It's not about condemning her. We're supposed to be looking at the faith that she shows and how she acts on it. I'm not condemning her for that. She realizes at some point, Obviously, she becomes married. I guarantee you she doesn't keep being a prostitute and married within that Israelite community. So there,
And the other part to remember that you always say is that Gentiles were always part of the story and she was a Canaanite woman.
that's right, and part of Jesus's family tree. But the other thing is, some people will tell you, if you go read on your own, this is a different Rahab. The one that's in Jesus's family tree, his ancestor, he couldn't possibly have a Canaanite prostitute as an ancestor. So it's a different Rahab. But when you read that account in Matthew, there's a really funny thing in the language. When he says that Salmon begat Obed by, it says that Rahab. It's like saying the Rahab. It's like if you said, my name is Abraham Lincoln, and they would say, you mean the Abraham Lincoln? And you say, yeah, the Abraham Lincoln. He beget Obed by that Rahab. And it's a really important distinction.
The one in the Old Testament.
It is that Rahab, that notorious Rahab, if you want to go that way. Are there people who didn't accept her? I don't know. You know, people are mean. But the fact is, we are supposed to understand that this woman, through faith, becomes one of the progenitors, one of the family tree of the Messiah. She's a Canaanite outsider prostitute, and through faith, she becomes part of that lineage. And you want to read the other part?
Hebrew 11.
Now, you said the first reference to Rahab was Matthew 5?
Matthew 1, verses 5 and 6.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. And then Hebrew 11, verses 30 and 31. And this is when Paul, if you believe Paul wrote Hebrews, which we do, he's talking about the people of faith. And he says, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the people had marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies in peace, did not perish with those who were disobedient.
And this, to me, is the final, this is the message of this for us. We have a tendency to look at certain people and say they don't deserve it, right? They've done stuff that's so bad, we're not letting them in the doors. And that's not the message we get from the Bible. That's not the message we get from the Messiah and the lineage. This woman was not only taken in, she becomes literally the great-great-grandmother of King David. That, according to the way a lot of people spin this, that shouldn't have been possible. She should have been denied, because look at the terrible things she did. I always have to go back and say, look at the terrible things I've done. We like to have a hierarchy and say, okay, this sin is a lot worse than mine. As long as I can keep that person up there and say, look how bad they are, then I don't have to look at me. That's where this comes up in Matthew, that as he's, or not Matthew, but that was in Hebrews, as Paul is describing these people of great faith, Rahab is included.
And finally, James, and we studied the book of James. Remember, James is sort of controversial or whatever, because people argue, you know, is he talking about works versus faith? And when we studied it, we talked about the idea that works are a result of having faith. And he is talking about that. And I'm in James 2, verses 20 to 26. O foolish man, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is worthless? Was not our father Abraham justified by what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith was working with his actions, and his faith was perfected by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called a friend of God. As you can see, a man is justified by his deeds and not by faith alone. In the same way, Was not even Rahab, the prostitute, justified by her actions when she welcomed the spies and sent them off on another route? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead.
It's probably not good to judge people 2,000 years ago. The writer, where James is talking about this, but notice when he talks about Rahab, first he talks about Abraham, and he says, wasn't even Rahab, justified by her faith? Even Rahab, look at how bad she was, and it just drives me up the wall. It does. That even Rahab says, look, somebody as undeserving as her is justified by faith. No. We went to a church, everybody, mostly dressed up, not me, but mostly dressed up. But this kid comes in, this young man, and he's got tats all over. He's got an array of flesh mutilating metal appendages in his face, right? And he has clearly been having a rough life, and he's heartbroken. And, I talked to him over several weeks. He's there for a reason. And he eventually brings his girlfriend in with him, right? Nobody else spoke to him. Nobody else spoke to him. And eventually he just disappeared. I tried. I went out looking. I found he's living, out in the colonias and stuff. But I went looking for him, and they just packed up stakes and left. Rahab is there for a reason. And it's not even Rahab, even someone as vile as her can be justified through faith. Turn that on yourself. That's the message of this. Rahab, just the same as everyone else, is justified through faith. There's the message. And you remember that she served, she served a huge part in this history that leads to the Messiah, right? That leads to Jesus. Anything else?
No, but we are going to, like we said, Ruth and Boaz, Rahab and Salome had a son, Boaz, and Boaz married Ruth. And we are going to study Ruth next week. And Ruth is, if you're looking in your Bible, it goes from Joshua to Judges, and then it goes to Ruth. And Ruth is 3 chapters.
There are some beautiful things in Ruth, some really fabulous things. If you get a chance, listen to it, because it's just, it's not just poetry, but beautiful, beautiful images about our relationship with God.
Are we going to do Naomi and Irene too, or no?
Naomi is Naomi and who?
Is it Irene?
Naomi is Ruth's mother-in-law, yes?
Yeah.
And what's the other daughter-in-law?
If it's, I don't remember. She's like sort of not appearing in this film.
Yeah,
I don't remember. Isn't that horrible? I don't remember that. But yeah, they're part of the story, and they absolutely, they definitely will be a part of it. God, just show us your ways. And your ways are not our ways. Bring us to the understanding that we're no better than any other person that we encounter every single day. And you saw fit to bring that grace and mercy to us, and then told us to bring the same grace and mercy to these people that we meet, the ones that you send in our path. Help us to keep that message from this lesson as we go out and encounter the people that you love as much as you love us. Amen.
Well, thank you. You guys have, those of you who are celebrating Father's Day, have an enjoyable afternoon. We got to call our daughter and let her know how to tell time. She knows we do Bible study, but
Some of these have
And
disappeared.
Virginia has to tell us
And then
who
some
it
of them, the
is
batteries
that
are
she was
going out.
trying to
I'm not
say.
looking. Jean came over on Veterans Day, and he
So
had
what
one
is
clip
that?
to his ear.
Unmute yourself. What? I have to read the messages.
And Terry, thank you for putting that out there.
So good. Let me read the, where are my notes? Stop, mute more. Let me see. Where's the chat? There's the chat. Sorry. Our daughter's dog continues on Friday. And so oh,
Wait, keep going.
that's Lander's dog. Oh, I'm sorry. I bet that's hard. Plan. Circle daughter that she was in the hospital with the dog. That's just I'm glad you were there too. Thank you for sharing that. There we go. Okay, well, you guys take care. Are you going to Corpus today? Terry? Yeah. Probably. Gotcha. Okay, you guys have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Have a good Sunday.
You too.
Bye.
Thank
Thank y'all.
y'all.